Jake Paul emerged victorious yet again on Saturday night, savagely knocking out Tyron Woodley in the 6th round of what had been a somewhat predictable and dull rematch on Showtime pay-per-view. Paul and Woodley didn't get a lot of hype this time around. Partially that's because the rematch came together on a very short notice, and there wasn't enough time to really promote the match. Also, somewhat that's because there wasn't really a whole lot of demand for Paul Woodley 2 after their August fight, which also wasn't as exciting to watch as we'd hoped. First, let's look at the rematch. The rematch was heading in a direction that would make fans think that maybe Jake Paul experiment was losing momentum. Not because he wasn't performing, on the contrary, he was winning a brutal fight, but because for the second time in a row, there wasn't any real excitement around this one. Unlike Darren Williams and Frank Gore going out there and giving us a crazy match with no punches held back, Paul and Woodley, as many audiences said, weren't cutting it this time. But a single Jake Paul right hand changed everything. The KO has gone viral. A single knockout like that will not only leave those who paid to watch the match live something amazing to remember, but give those who didn't pay this time around to catch it live a reason to think again for next time. The Jake Paul fascination isn't going away anytime soon. What he really needs right now is a worthy opponent. There's not going to be a third fight with Tyron Woodley. That's totally settled. He knocked that man right out, and it's all over and done with. So, what lies in store for Paul now? Tommy Fury? The most obvious thing that would be to go back to the feud with Tommy Fury, who was meant to be Paul's rival on Saturday before forfeiting because of illness and injury less than 2 weeks prior to the fight. Fury, an upcoming 22-year-old light heavyweight with a 7-0 record along with 4 KOs and a renowned last name, competed on the first Paul Woodley card all the way back in August and wasn't exactly shining in his 4-round win against Anthony Taylor. To get ready for the brawl with Jake Paul, Fury was training with half-brother Tyson and Sugar Hill Stewart. It is, after all, good training to do, and partially because Tommy really can't afford to underestimate Jake Paul and take him less than absolutely seriously, because losing to Jake Paul would really significantly wound his reputation as a professional boxer. Paul may or may not be up for doing this now. He didn't seem too into it the first time around, but it was a choice that made enough sense. If he's actually irritated with Fury or feels like he wasted his time with this enemy, Tommy might not get another chance to cash the payday and knock off the internet superstar, Nate Diaz or Jorge Masvidal. Nate, during our interview with Ariel Helwana, was asked if he was stoked about the main event, to which he said no. When asked if he had any predictions to make for the main event, he said, "I don't give a." After the fight, Paul called out both fighters saying, "Masvidal and Nate Diaz, y'all are some for leaving this arena. Because I know you don't want that, I'll take out both of y'all next. Just get out of your contract with Daddy Dana." That last part is the trickiest to consider though, the contract. Dana White has no solid motive to release Nate Diaz or Jorge Masvidal for their contracts, nor keep them under contract, but go ahead and fight with Paul. For one thing, they could very well lose. Those two also aren't professional boxers, and from what we've seen so far, even veteran MMA fighters have so far not done great against Paul in boxing matches. He's proven that he's a force to be reckoned with, and isn't going anywhere soon. Vitor Belfort. A short while ago, 44-year-old Vitor Belfort was able to punch an old man so viciously that a referee had to intervene for the sake of whatever little bit of decency the boxing world still holds on to, and then threw out a disposable $30 million winner-take-all challenge to Jake Paul to show up to fight on a Triller show. So about that, Jake Paul had conducted business with Triller already and thought he had done enough. Signing with Showtime and promoting himself, it has worked out pretty nicely for Jake so far. Seems like it's going to stay that way for some time now. Triller have had quite a few issues with the boxing world, so much that it's reasonable to question whether there's any real $30 million at stake here. Chances are Vitor Belfort would fight Jake Paul because of how competitive he is. Vitor's going to go enter the ring and throw shots at anybody who will be there to take them. That's his spirit. There are definitely a few reasons this doesn't happen, and they go both ways. Jake Paul might not want to pick a fight with this guy, and if Belfort is hung up on a Triller contract, that probably will null it. Conor McGregor. Conor McGregor is coming off pretty bad in a second straight loss to Dustin Poirier, and his public behavior since has been different to say the least, and not in a good way either. McGregor versus Jake Paul would undoubtedly be a colossal money fight. It would fulfill all the criteria that get people interested in watching novelty fights like this would be, if it happens, that is. The promotional buildup would be possibly one of the biggest things in UFC history. The hype around the fight alone would earn insane levels of hype and profit. Maybe next he'll go for Canelo Alvarez. We can't really say, but that would be pretty exciting too. Alan Babic. Babic looks like he can take a hit. He can probably boil down. But who knows? Maybe for that reason alone, he'll be the next one to square off against Paul in the ring. But when you really look at it, Babin may not be a professional boxer with super advanced technical skills, but he isn't a rookie either. He does come with an impressive 10-0 record with 10 knockouts after all. His fights are often packed with intense and memorable moments. Whatever questions remained from the first fight against Woodley, Paul answered them in his rematch on Saturday night. While it wasn't the most dramatic affair, through 5+ rounds, Paul ultimately had to land just one excruciatingly right hand that absolutely destroyed Woodley, sending the former UFC champion face first on the ground in defeat. The fight was halted immediately as referee Christopher Young called for medical personnel to check on Woodley, who eventually got back up and seemed to be okay. The end came during the 6th round. This is as real as it gets, just like my right hand. Paul, after shifting to 5-0 in his career with 4 knockouts. This guy is a legend. Don't take anything away from his career as a UFC champion. Respect him for taking this fight on 2 weeks' notice because Tommy Fury's a bitch, and he backed out of the fight. This is a real fighter. Unlike the first fight, Woodley actually earned himself a quick start by sending out big looping punches, while Paul looked to get his jab from the outside. After the opening minute, Woodley slowed himself down to some extent, instead choosing to explode ahead with single shots, as Paul used his footwork to steer clear of that path. How it really went down. As the second round was well underway, Paul hit Woodley with a well-placed overhand right that got the crowd excited as he sought to demonstrate his power, which didn't get displayed much in the initial round. Woodley retaliated with a big right hand of his own, although he didn't quite cut it as clean as Paul during the hits being thrown. Paul snapped off 2 more stiff jabs in the 3rd round that got Woodley's attention before an accidental elbow in the clinch opened a nasty gash as the Ohio native felt the blood start dripping down his face. As Paul dealt with a cut for the first time in his young career, Woodley started firing away with another right hand slipping through his opponent's defense. The output from Woodley was better than the first fight, but not all that much improved, and it resulted in a lot of single punches thrown rather than any combinations. Paul was doing much the same, although he did still manage to stick a jab in Woodley's face and then go down to the body as well. That repetition to make Woodley respect the body shots is what actually helped create the knockout as Paul searched for that same combination in the 6th round. This time, Paul looked to the body, but then headed over the top with the right hand that separated Woodley from consciousness as soon as the punch made its impact. It was a tough fight, Paul commented on his performance. I got the job done. I knew it would happen like that, like a lumberjack. Timber. Woodley was understandably disappointed when he got back up to his feet, but he added that he was good in spite of the brutal knockout. He now falls all the way down to 0-2 in his boxing career after the 2nd loss in a row to Paul. As for Paul, he stands undefeated while looking ahead to what will surely become an ambitious 2022 as the social influencer turned boxer seeks to add on to an already impressive resume through 5 fights.